And on that note, I'm Kat Higgins, and I have toured Menlo live and in person. I actually dragged somebody with me from the Corporate Rebels group that I had met when I was overseas at one of their meetings, and it was amazing. It was so well done. I've raved about it ever since then, and in my quest to walk through as many self-managing companies as we can and find them in South Bend or find them in the US, it was great to find somebody who was really close and nearby with such open arms. So welcome everybody. And on that note, let's get started. Don, do you want to intro our speaker, or would you like me to do that?
Sure, I can do it. Hey everybody, this is Dom again. I'm going to do a quick introduction to our speaker, and then we'll turn the stage over to him so that we can leave time for Q&A. This is our guest for March 2026, Menlo Innovations CEO and Chief Storyteller Rich Sheridan. Rich became disillusioned in the middle of his career in the chaotic technology industry. He had an all-consuming thought: things can be better, much better. He had to find a way. Why couldn't a workplace be filled with camaraderie, human energy, creativity, and productivity? I think we've all asked ourselves that. Ultimately, Rich co-founded Menlo Innovations in 2001 to end human suffering in the workplace. His unique approach to custom software creation is so surprisingly different that 3,000 people a year travel from around the world just to see how they do it, myself and Kat among them. His passion for creating joyful work environments and cultures led to his best-selling and widely celebrated books, Joy Inc., How We Built a Workplace People Love, and Chief Joy Officer, How Great Leaders Elevate Human Energy and Eliminate Fear. And he's here to talk to us today about joy and purpose, building an intentional culture. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rich Sheridan.
Woohoo. Well, great to be with you all. I'm in, it seems like I'm close to some of you. I'm in lovely downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're getting a little bit of snow today, but not as much as the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which got about 3 to 4 feet of snow in the last 2 days. So we're delightfully spared that problem. I'm going to just share a few slides here with you, and then I know our goal is to just have a really good conversation, but I figured I'd set it up a little bit. So let me see if this works. I'm going to share my entire screen because that's the only thing I've ever been able to get working on Google Meets. And tell me if you can see the Blue Angels. Somebody yell out and say, I can see them.
We can see
them.
Perfect. Thank you. So I am going to talk about joy and purpose. It's an unusual word in the context of work. As mentioned in my introduction, I've written a couple of books, and hopefully in the conversation today, I will take you on a sort of a hypothesis journey that words like joy and love actually do have a place in our workplaces if we're intentional about it, and they can have a very powerful effect. Tell you a little bit of personal history to see why I'm the guy who talks about joy in the context of work. I've been in this software industry for a long time. I touched a computer for the first time back in the 70s. I was just a kid back then. I am an old guy, but I was very young back in those days. And by 1973, I'd won an international programming contest by typing in all of the Major League Baseball players into the computer so my friends and I could play our favorite Major League Baseball teams against one another in the cold Michigan winter months. So you're probably, talking to the guy who invented fantasy baseball. I'm not actually sure, but my life is likely littered with lost opportunities like this. But that programming contest win actually landed me a job as a programmer before I could even drive a car. I couldn't believe people would pay me to do this thing I just love to do as a hobby. Eventually, I came up here to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, where I got a couple of degrees in computer science, computer engineering, and launched a career that, quite frankly, the way the world measures success looked perfect. I had everything: raises, promotions, stock options, title, authority, team size, all the things the world measures as success. I went from programmer in 1982 to VP of R&D for a company that would become the #1 public company in Michigan based on stock growth in 1999. That was the internet bubble year, so it was fun, but it wasn't real. But along the way, while I had this lovely career rise that my wife was very happy about, and my parents were very proud of me, there was a far different and much more important line. By my mid-30s, my heart was breaking for a career that I thought would carry me for a lifetime, and I wanted out. We've been talking a little bit about the weather here. I was actually contemplating starting a canoe camp in the Boundary Waters of Minnesota. Wouldn't be a pleasant time right now for sure, but I wanted to get as far away from technology as I could. But my inner optimist kicked in. I knew when I was in a room full of manure, and I figured there had to be a pony in this room somewhere, because what I realized was in this trough of disillusionment that I was in, it wasn't just me. It wasn't something wrong with me. It was something wrong with the whole industry. So what was going on? What was I seeing? And what was I seeing not only for myself personally, but for others? And many of you who have been in the tech industry know that we can often operate in chaos. Chaos is easy to imagine in the tech industry. We're coming in, phones ringing off the hook with problems, working all-nighters and that sort of thing. And I would often come home after very late nights, and my wife would look at me and she'd say, "Honey, you look really tired. Did you get a lot done today?" I realized, no, I got nothing done. I was busy from one end of the day to the other, but nothing done. And when you operate in chaos for too long, negative events occur. I used to have to over-explain this to the world, then things like CrowdStrike happened, or Amazon just lost 1 million orders recently for some coding errors. There are big negative events that occur, and usually when those negative events occur, there are corporate responses that often look like big 3-ring binders. We love our acronyms in the software industry, so we'll fill it a big thick binder with stage gates and templated documents and sign-offs and committees and meeting cadences, and we'll call it an acronym like the software development lifecycle process. We usually have to put a police force in charge of just minding the documents, and you clearly and quickly go from chaos to full-blown bureaucracy. You go from the land of never getting anything done to the land of never getting anything started. And this was my life back in those days, going back and forth, trying to figure out how do we quell all the problems I was having. And it even got worse, because after a while, once the bureaucracy kicked in, we still had to get stuff done. So shadow IT groups formed. We learned to placate the bureaucracy on one side while literally operating in chaos simultaneously on the other side. And as I rose through the management ranks, as I climbed that arrow you were seeing earlier, I started to wake up to maybe there's a lighter version of our SDLC, just a little stapled together document for smaller projects, that sort of thing. But even that didn't work. And eventually I tried canceling them all and grabbing the business buzzword of the day. In the early days, it'd be something like ISO or that sort of thing, maybe lately Agile. And usually we just adopt these new things in name only, and we just paper over old process with new vocabulary. And often it just simply means we prefer chaos over bureaucracy. So this was my life, back and forth it goes. And probably some of you have had a similar experience in your career. And that's what was going on down there. And that's, again, where my inner optimist kicked in. I thought, man, I'm stuck in a room full of manure here. There's got to be a pony in this room somewhere. So my journey out led me to authors and books, but intriguingly, not books on technology. The problem I was facing, I decided by reading old books by old authors like Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence, Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, and Peter Drucker's books on management, was that the problem we had was not a technological problem. It was a how do we organize the people more effectively problem. And that's really what became my life journey from that point forward. I was looking for something. I didn't know what it was. I just knew I would know it when I saw it. And in 1999, that happened. I met a gentleman who would one day become my co-founder of Menlo, James Goebel. I read a book by another frustrated programmer named Kent Beck, who wrote something called Extreme Programming Explained. And I saw a video on an industrial design firm in California called IDEO. Nightline had done an episode back then, and watched them redesign the standard shopping cart in just 5 days. And those three things happened in quick succession to one another. Literally, I would call this a click moment for me, where suddenly all of the pain, all of the suffering, all the reading, all the searching became clear. And over the next 2 years, between 1999 and 2001, I reinvented the company where I was VP of R&D. It's a company called Interface Systems on the west side of Ann Arbor. And I'd probably still be there to this day. The results were so dramatic, but in 2001, we had been purchased by a California parent, and the internet bubble burst, and they had to shutter every remote office they had, including mine. And suddenly, after a pretty good run from 1973 to 2001, I was out of work. And I went home and told my wife I'd lost my job. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "You're unemployed?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." And took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment. But in 2001, I lost everything. Job, title, paycheck, stock options went to zero. Everything gone, save one thing. They could not take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And that's really what I want to share with you today, at least an early peek into it, but also create a conversation with you that we can talk about. So what I learned was my goal was no longer about finding the perfect setting dial between chaos and bureaucracy. What I learned is we can create a new mental model for our human organizations. And I related to that of an airplane. If I have a pilot's license, so this was probably a natural thing for me to go towards. But even if you don't have a pilot's license like me, I think this analogy works pretty well. There's a force of lift that keeps the plane up in the air. There's a force of weight that's trying to pull it back down, a force of thrust that's pulling it forward by the jet engine or the propeller, and a force of drag that's holding us back. So what are the comparators to our human organizations? Well, I would declare one of the most squandered energy forces on the planet is the lift of human energy. How can I make such a claim? Well, the Gallup Group has been measuring our human organizations decade in and decade out, and the needle just hasn't moved much. It tells us that 60 to 70% of people are disengaged at work. This is a fundamental failure of leadership. If we don't preserve our human energy, what else do we have? The weight that holds us down, the weight of that bureaucracy I talked about, meeting load. Often joke with big corporate audiences that if you want to suck the human energy out of an organization, it's a simple 3-step process. Number 1, have lots of meetings. Number 2, don't make any decisions in those meetings. And number 3, if perchance by mistake you happen to make a decision, that's okay. Just don't act on it, and you'll literally pull the life out of your organization. Now, that was sarcasm. That was not a formula. Don't write it down and don't apply it where you work. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of purpose. And I'll spend a little bit more time on this later, but this is a really important one for us humans. And then the drag that holds us back is the drag of fear. Fear is so prevalent in our human organizations, I figure they must teach classes at business schools to learn how to lead people with fear-mongering. So what are some things we could do in all of these areas? Well, to get to human energy, clarity over ambiguity, giving people the ability to go to work and actually get meaningful things done. The lightening up the bureaucratic workload, move to a take action versus take a meeting type of posture. Get rid of the slower, no decision making by actually trying things. The thrust that we should focus on should be externally focused. The purpose of our organization should be able to ask and answer in my mind, 2 simple questions. Who do we serve, and what would delight look like for them? And we'll talk a little bit about this later, and I'll relate it to Menlo's purpose. And then the drag of fear, again, there's just so many different ways that we micromanage people, that we have the boss walking around at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday saying, "Hey, how's it going? Are you coming in this weekend?" and all that kind of stuff. We've got to get these forces in the right balance. We'll never get our corporate aircraft off the ground. We need to diminish the fear. We need to lighten up the bureaucratic workload. It wouldn't be possible to get rid of all of it, nor should we. There are certain things we do that we should be afraid of. And therefore, we're not going to get rid of all the fear in our organization. And again, that wouldn't even be healthy. What I'm really talking about is diminishing the places where we manufacture artificial fear in order to motivate, and make sure we're doing everything we can to keep the human energy of our team high. Make sure we're communicating effectively the purpose of our organization, make sure everyone understands it and is connected to that purpose. If we do all those things, our little corporate aircraft will get the forces in the right balance and get off the ground. Another piece of delightful language in flying that I just can't resist in a presentation like this. The next time you're on an airplane and the pilot gives full throttle and is watching the airspeed indicator rise until it hits takeoff speed, as soon as it hits that magic takeoff speed, the pilot pulls back on the yoke just a little bit, creating a new angle between the nose of the aircraft and the runway. That angle has a pretty special name. It's called a positive attitude. And as soon as that positive attitude is created, off the plane goes. And the reason I bring this up in the context of this conversation is a lot of people ask me, what can I personally do in the face of all the challenges that I face in an organization or where I work or even in the world for that matter? And a positive attitude is something we are 100% in control of. And it doesn't have to be a lot. This isn't like clicking your heels like Tigger when you come in every day. Just a little bit of positive attitude can make a huge difference inside your organization. Little history lesson here that I think is valuable to consider. The Wright brothers achieved controlled powered manned flight in 1903. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, there was a competing team, very well-funded team in Washington, D.C., led by Samuel Pierpont Langley. But as soon as the Wright brothers achieved this feat, Langley and his team quit. I find that really remarkable. I mean, this wasn't the end of something. This was the beginning of something. Why would Langley and his team quit? I think it goes to that purpose we've been talking about. Langley and his team wanted the glory of being known as the first in flight. When they lost that, they quit. The Wright brothers wanted to fly. A difference in purpose can make a huge difference. Now, shortly after this first flight, Orville Wright was interviewed, and he was asked, how significant is this event? And he said, we'll never be able to build an aircraft that carries more than 2 people. He said, we've done the math, and believe me, the Wright brothers had always done the math. And they said that it's just not physically possible. The weight of the passengers, the amount of power required by the engine, the size of the engine needed, the amount of fuel required, the aerodynamics of the plane will just never be able to create an aircraft bigger than that'll carry more than 2 people. It's just not physically possible. So while it is an exciting moment in human history, not all that practical an invention. Now, how do I know this? Well, I read a story about Orville Wright's life, and this story was told in that book. I read that book on a 747 to London, 400 passengers, 50,000 gallons of fuel, flying at 500 miles an hour at 35,000 feet. The first 747 flew in 1969, a scant 21 years after Orville Wright's passing. The reason I bring up this historical reminder for all of us as leaders is we can, in fact, as leaders, lift the human energy of our teams once we understand these relevant concepts, and we can fly to heights and distances that were previously unimaginable, even to the people who begin these movements. And I think that's probably what gathers Self-Management Team USA, the leaders and the people who subscribe to this, is you fundamentally believe this is possible, and you're just looking for ideas along the way of how do we get from where we are to where we want to be. And I think that is a very noble pursuit. Here's a picture of a version of Menlo, probably, maybe, Kat, the one you visited, I'm not sure.
It's very similar.
Yep, this was the basement of the Liberty Square parking structure. How's that for a description of a?
It's not a basement. The one I saw was not. There was a big screen, looked like, with everyone's who we were pairing with on the side.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think we hit it well that it was a basement actually. But anyways, we'd have to find out when you were here. But the idea here is that in order to accomplish something different, we wanted to accomplish something big. And what we wanted to do, as was alluded to in the introduction, was we wanted to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And if you're going to do that, you're going to pick a big goal like that, you're probably going to have to do some things differently. We were inspired by Kent Beck's Extreme Programming Explained book. We glommed onto this idea of pairing two people together at a single computer. But we didn't just pair our programmers, as Kent suggested, we paired everybody. The pairs are assigned in our world, and we switch them every 5 working days. The human energy that results from that construct alone is palpable. And there's lots of other things we can talk about in terms of what we do in this room, but probably the other one to focus on is this idea of what we call high-tech anthropology. A lot of people wonder why a software team, we do custom design and development for a living, we build software for other businesses. They wonder why would we need anthropologists on our team? And our simple statement is, if the software we're designing and building is one day going to be used by humans, wouldn't it be neat to understand those humans the way an anthropologist does in their native environment, more through observation than interview? Design the errors out of the system because we observe those mistakes being made, and we don't criticize the users by calling them stupid and running dummies books for them. We actually honor them with what they already know and build their knowledge into the user experience. That's what our high-tech anthropology team does. So the combination of those two things is an element of what makes Menlo pretty special. And many of you have visited either virtually or in person. I encourage you, we do both of those still to this day. We still get a couple of thousand visitors a year, every year, that come and visit us. And if someone had asked me in the earliest days of Menlo what my goal was, I might have said something like Orville Wright would have said. I might have said 2. If we could get a software process to the point where we would only have, say, 2 emergencies a week, that would be such an uplift in my life. Because in my old trough of disillusionment days, I was running from fire to fire to fire to fire every single day. And if I could get it down to 2 fires a week, it would have felt like a vacation. If someone had pushed me, perhaps like they pushed Orville, well, what about 2 a month, 2 a quarter, 2 a year, Rich? Why don't you set your sights higher than that? I would have said, no way. This is software. There's no way you could accomplish that. Well, here we are 25 years in. We founded the company in 2001. We'll turn 25 on June 12th of this year, and we have had exactly 2 software emergencies in our history. I would have never believed in the earliest days that anything like that was possible. And it confirms for me that once we figure out those relevant principles of how to drive our human organizations, we can get to heights and distances that were previously unimaginable. So this is kind of the last part of the presentation before we dive into discussion. But here's a little bit of how we think about building a culture of joyful leadership. Start with that purpose. Be able to ask and answer those 2 questions. Who do you serve and what would delight look like for them? This is very important here at Menlo. And interestingly for us, the people we serve are the end users of the software that we're designing and developing. Intriguingly, those are not the people who pay us to do the work. We're being paid by business sponsors to build software to either create a product to go out to market or to be internally used by that corporation inside of their business. But what we're thinking about first and foremost are the often nameless, voiceless people in the software process, the end users. And so our job is to make sure we're delighting them. Sometimes we have to fight very hard on their behalf. Value leadership over hierarchical authority. I'm going to guess we're going to talk a lot about this. We don't really have bosses at Menlo, but we absolutely have leaders here. And I'm not saying leaders are good and bosses are bad, because we probably all had different and good and bad versions of both. But what I am saying is you don't need to wait for a place on an org chart to lead. You don't need to wait for a title or a corner office. Pursue systems thinking over bureaucratic thinking. Simple, repeatable, measurable, visible systems will beat bureaucracy every single time. Create an environment of caring for everybody on the team. Care up to the topmost person in the organization, care down to the front lines, care across to your peers. Caring is such an important part of a good culture. Build an environment where we're learning together all the time. It's what I appreciated most about Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of building a learning organization. My goodness, we've got to be learning in this industry all the time. And I think that just accelerated a ton last year or so. And then ultimately, a fundamental act of leadership is storytelling. I'll probably share a few stories later today as we go through our discussion. But storytelling is an art as old as human history. We have always told stories as humans, either around the campfire, at the foot of totems. We build our nation's stories into our anthems. Stories we tell are stories of triumph and tragedy in the past and visionary stories of the future. Storytelling is just a fundamental act of leadership. So I'm going to stop there. I have lots of other things I could have shared today, but I didn't want to take up our whole hour together just with my stories. You can learn more from this QR code, but I'm going to just, I'll let the folks at Self Management USA send that out to everybody because I want to come back and see you all. And so I'm going to exit my screen and stop sharing, and then we can have a conversation.
Well, on top of that, if you fill out our post-event survey, you can be selected to have I think you're sending 2 copies so you can be randomly chosen to get a copy of one of these books. So we have a question in the chat that came up on my tour. Matt was asking, how do the introverts at Menlo take to be paired with somebody else? And it's funny that he said that because it was a big conversation when I was touring, and someone who was in a pair who was an introvert, self-identified, responded. So
yeah,
what do you think, Richard?
I'm going to say Menlo could not function without its introverts. If everybody was extroverted here, we do have a couple of raging extroverts on the team. That's about all we can handle because then they're in broadcast mode always. What we have found, and this is, a lot of people think that introverts prefer sensory deprivation and isolation. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold that I caught from my grandson. So using my voice is probably not the best idea today.
Well, thank you for joining us anyway.
Yeah, no problem. So what we've found is that what introverts actually prefer isn't sensory deprivation and isolation. They prefer fewer, safer, deeper relationships. And they get that here. It was funny. We just had a guy interviewing here yesterday, and it's amazing what people share during an interview process. And he came up to one of our leaders and said, we asked him how his day went, because when you interview here, you actually do work in a pair. And he said, he says, I have ADHD. And he just put that out there. And he said, it's fascinating. When I'm paired with another person, I just stay focused all day long. I can't remember the last time I had this productive a day. So again, different, that's not introversion, of course, but just a different aspect of how we are different humans.
If I can just add to that really quick, because what I heard on my tour, the guy who responded said, when I first started, I felt really exhausted. I'll also give you a break from talking. He said, I felt really exhausted my first week because he had no experience with, keep sort of having to keep the social focus up in addition to the work. But he found later on that as he developed relationships, and I might be inaccurately paraphrasing, he said that we don't talk all day long. It's more like, you're going to do this, I'm going to do that. And it's like, what do you think? Yeah. Like, okay, cool. Like, it's not as much talking as you would think. So he actually said the same thing as your candidate, which was it's hyper focused. So.
Yeah, and a lot of people are shocked, and maybe I should say this out loud because it's such an assumption in my brain that others will misinterpret. And I can actually show it to you, although we're all at lunch right now. But we are 5 days a week in the office. Mm-hmm.
In software, which I thought was crazy too.
Yeah, and it was crazy 5 years ago. It's supremely crazy now.
It is.
And we're working in a big open room, shoulder to shoulder in conversation. So it's a noisy environment. I walked in this morning, I was a little bit later than most. Place was just buzzing with conversations. And I will tell you, I get a thrill from that, just feeling those human conversations. But people wonder, like, how do you focus and concentrate in an environment like that? And what you find is it's the same way you would concentrate and focus in a noisy restaurant or a coffee shop. You're just one-on-one with the person sitting next to you. And so there's a lot of cognitive psychology that I probably don't even understand that's going on in the room here.
Well, he said he loved it. You took him, what was it, the emotional, or not emotional, but he was a little tired from it at first, but once he adjusted, he said he really, really loved it and gained more connected relationships at that job than any he had in the past. That was his summary. So, hey, what else do we have here? Doug, you're raising your hand. Why don't you go ahead and then we'll pull some from the chat.
Sure, thank you. Rich, thank you for the excellent presentation. And my question is around the drag of fear. I'm curious, in your experience, to what degree is the drag of fear related to a misperception or misunderstanding of risk? And if it is related to that, is there anything we can do to mitigate that fear?
Yeah, first of all, Doug, you and I know each other, don't we?
I'm the Morningstar guy.
Got it. Okay.
And we met at
You guys never met, really?
what's that?
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, look, the work we do here at Menlo often holds the lives of people in its hands. So we rebuilt the organ transplant information system at the University of Michigan Health System. I mean, it's really important that the work we do really well. And so we take that very seriously. And there is an implicit fear inside of those kind of life care types of projects. And, we take that kind of seriousness into everything we do. But I think the way fear stays at bay is when you feel like you have a team of people around you, where it isn't your own individual personal responsibility to make sure that everything's going to be right, but that you're there with your pair partner. I would say the first place fear can be diminished is you got somebody sitting right there with you who's asking you questions, challenging about what you're doing, keeping you on your toes, making sure that the work you're doing is going to be high quality work. Working in that open and collaborative space, everybody who's on the same project is literally co-located together. If we went back and looked at that picture, you'd see pods of tables. The interesting thing about the way we set up our physical space is the people go to the work doesn't come to the people. Nobody has their own individual desk or chair or computer to call their own. If you're on the Harrison project, you're in the Harrison pod. What that means is everybody on the Harrison project is seated near you. There's this part of your brain that's kind of like listening in, sort of cocktail ears. It's called the reticular activator, and it's literally interrupting your peers when you say something that to them sounds a little dumb, and they inject themselves into it. So I think the environment itself helps a lot with that. I use an example in Joy Inc. where, if you put a frightened 6-year-old on the edge of a deep, dark forest in the nighttime with the wind blowing the branches back and forth and the moon dipping in and out of the cloud cover, that 6-year-old won't move. They'll be frozen solid. Put an equally frightened 6-year-old holding their hand and they will confidently walk through the forest together. And so I think that's, one element of it. And then there's some very specific things we do here. We keep everything visual. It's out on the wall. We're not hiding stories. When we get behind, it's obvious in our visual management systems that it's there. But we try not to get excited when we're ahead of plan, and we try not to get excited in the opposite direction when we're behind plan. To us, that's just information. And if information is flowing, we can keep fear at bay as much as possible.
Thank you.
You bet.
Awesome. Kat's on mute, but Rebecca had a couple questions in the chat.
I do. I wondered if you're still doing the same hiring process where I get paired with someone and then I need to present why they're a good candidate. I love that idea. And then my second question was about how you, at that time when I visited, you rotated people from position to position, not just within the programming groups, but also into accounting or other parts of the business so that there could be some financial transparency. And there's one more, and that is how you gave raises to people, that the teams decided who should get raises. So any one of those or all of them, I just love that you're still continuing.
And forgive me if I forget one of them along the way, but good news, Rebecca, not only do we still do hiring that way, we're doing one of our, what we call extreme interviews this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We've got 33 people coming in all at once. I'll describe it to the rest of everybody because they don't know what you know. So we're bringing in 33 candidates tonight. We're growing right now, which is fun and and a little bit stressful because we're growing faster than we anticipated this year, which again, good problem to have for about 5 minutes, and it's just a regular problem. But so 33 people come in tonight at 4 o'clock. We'll do a little bit of an introductory session with them. We've already told them what to expect. So this, what I'm about to describe would sound shocking if you didn't know, but we've given them a full write-up on what to expect. So they shouldn't be shocked if they read everything we gave them beforehand. But what'll happen is for 20 minutes, they will be paired with another candidate. And we will tell them that what we're looking for as that candidate and them work together is your job is to help the person sitting next to you get a second interview. One of our core values here is helping others succeed, and we start teaching that value from the moment of first contact. So for 20 minutes, we're going to watch two human beings work together. Single pencil, single piece of paper, single problem. Nothing complicated, not stupid questions like how many golf balls would it take to fill up Menlo Innovations software factory or anything. These are simple, practical exercises that hopefully people will just dive into the work and they start communicating with one another. A Menlonian is watching and simply taking notes about what they see. We're not asking any questions of the candidate during this interview. 20 minutes in, we switch the pairs. Now you're paired with another person doing a different task, different Menlonian watching. We do that 3 times. That was the first interview. We send you all home. That entire process of evaluating, or not evaluating, but running through the exercises with those 33 people will happen tonight in less than 2 hours. By 6:30 tonight, they will be home with their families. Now, we're going to stay late afterwards. We'll get food here. We'll get pizza and pop. And then we're going to evaluate each one of the 33 by essentially describing what we saw and voting with our thumbs. If you get 3 enthusiastic thumbs up because you were watched by 3 different Menlonians, we don't even talk about you. You're a candidate to come back for a second interview, which I'll describe in a second. If you get a mixed review, 1 thumb up, 1 in the middle, 1 down, then we'll talk and we'll see what did everybody see. And then once the entire team of people, and if there are 33 people here, there would be 17 of us watching, and we'll talk about how we fit the last 34th person in if you want. But suffice to say, we just contribute a Menlonian to the process, so we have 34. And then we talk and everybody listens to the conversations, and based on what they hear, the entire group of 17 will vote for their thumbs. And again, we'll just count thumbs and then move on to the next candidate. If there are 3 enthusiastic thumbs down, we have to talk because something probably really funny happened and we need to hear it. But at that point, we'll be here from 4 to 6 with the candidates, sort of 6 to 6:30 eating dinner ourselves, 6:30 to 8:30 or 9 o'clock doing our voting on the next interview candidates, and then we all go home. So imagine that between 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock tonight, we will have reviewed and made decisions on 33 candidates. It is remarkable. A lot of companies will declare we can't find talent to save our lives. I would declare they usually do. Their interview and hiring process is just so slow that by the time they make an offer, that candidate has already moved on to another position. And so it's not that you can't find talent, it's that your hiring processes are too slow. And so the 1-day trial, we call it, the second interview, you come in on your own for a day. You pair in the morning with one Menlonian, pair in the afternoon with another one, do real work on a real client project, and we pay you for that day. And if that day works, again, it works for you and for the people you paired with, then we'll invite you in, if it works for your life, a paid 3-week trial. Sometimes it doesn't work for your life because you've got another job. We'll figure out something clever to. But the whole thing we're trying to do is, and this is where I think a lot of interview processes fail, is we're trying to give people who want to work here, because I don't know, maybe, some of you are listening, you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I'd love to work in an environment like this. You don't actually know that till you come here and work for a day or two, and so we want to give you the best possible chance of seeing what it's like to work here. And it's worked pretty well for us. We've been doing the same process, not only for the 25 years of Menlo, but we invented this process back at Interface Systems in those 2 years. So we've been doing this for 27 years now. So that was question number one. I can't remember what the other two questions are. I promise they won't be that long of an answer.
That's a great answer. The second was rotating different roles.
Oh, yeah.
And the third was raises.
Yep. So rotations, typically birds of a feather flock together. So programmers will pair with programmers, high-tech anthropologists with high-tech anthropologists. We'll have mixed pairs as well, depending on the actual need of the project. And then, yes, people who wear a particular hat can say, you know what, I'd really like to try a different hat in the organization. Could I try a different role? We have 4 main roles: project manager, QA, high-tech anthropology, and software development. But as you mentioned, one of our project managers, Emily, tried her hand at accounting, and she's now our controller. She still does project management, but she's also, I would say, on her way to becoming chief financial officer someday here. She pretty much handles all of the accounting stuff. But she's also bringing others into the mix on that so that she isn't a singular tower of knowledge on those kind of things. And then the raise process here, yeah, that's another crazy aspect of Menlo. We have everyone's pay posted on a wallboard display that the world can see, and they're post-it notes on a chart on the wall, and basically every box that the post-it notes are in defines a very explicit pay level. So everybody at Menlo knows what everybody else is making. And there's no hidden stuff there. And Fortune 500 execs who visit literally hyperventilate at this. They're like, oh my gosh, you mean everybody here knows what everybody makes? Oh my gosh. And I'm like, I understand why they hyperventilate, because typical compensation systems are so convoluted that no one would ever want to expose them because they wouldn't be rational. Here, ours still may not be rational, but when you publicly display it, people can start pointing to it and say, hey, why is so-so making more money than me? And geez, I don't know, we should have a good explanation for that. The only way you make more money here is to get your post-it note moved up to the box above you or in the next column down below. And the only way that happens is through pure evaluation. And we have a whole process that the team designed called Prosperity that makes those decisions. And, I just simply say, who would know better than the people you pair with how you're doing here? So
I think that was thrilling in the tour. That was probably the most amazing thing that I walked away with. Was
it's fun.
The other thing that was interesting that was on there is that so I'm in position A, and my next promotion would be position B in this category. Let's say I'm a programmer. Yep. It specifically says what observable criteria need to be met as my peers review me. So I know I'm graded on A, B, C, D, E. I need to work on skill E. So while you're pairing with me, can you give me a chance to practice skill E and then assess me on it because I'm trying to go for this next level? It's so transparent that I just think the flow is very efficient.
Well, and it's a whole spirit of helping others succeed. Because maybe the key difference, and this can't be avoided in a conversation like this, the raises at Menlo are not a zero-sum game. Everybody could move up this year, and then part of that's our business model. Like if you move up in the senior, we start charging more for you with our customers. So there's actually an incentive for Menlo to move you up. But on the other hand, everybody knows too, if we're moving people up artificially and they aren't delivering the value our customers expect, then we'll be embarrassed with that. So there's a really good check and balance inside of our equation for those moves. But again, there's no, how many people went to their annual review and I exceeded expectations this year, and somebody says, well, only 3.7% of you can exceed here, and you did it 5 years ago, and you got to wait your turn. Like, I don't know how humans come up with these systems.
I remember once setting up a meeting with a boss, and he said, why are you setting it up? I gave you a 4 out of 5. That's really good. And I said, because my name's not Kate. It's Kat. He didn't even know. I literally never seen me. So Be great to have good, consistently high value performance reviews.
I
Anyway,
love it. I love it.
Don, what you got?
Yeah, but Mark had a question first.
Okay.
So Mark, do you want to come off mute and say it?
No, you back. That was great, Rich, and you already kind of answered it with the 4 categories, so I'm good. Go on to your question, Dom.
All right, sounds good, sir. Yeah, Rich, thank you for all this. This is really great. I was going to ask about one of your slides where you're talking about leaders, not bosses. And, I want to know a little bit next level of details of kind of how that worked. Sometimes we have functional leaders, but they're not the boss, like, the product owner, right? Or we have where everybody can take initiative and they get kind of situational leadership or something else or a combination. How do you see that working at Menlo?
Yeah, so a lot of these answers require peeling a little bit of the onion. So one of our core values is run the experiment. And what that says is try stuff. Don't contemplate it. If you have an idea, present it to your peers. And if they're like pushing back on you saying, I don't think that'll work this year or something like that, just say, hey, could we just run the experiment? And so one way to lead is to bring new ideas to the table, design an experiment and run it. And it might not work, and that's okay. It's why we call it an experiment. Experiments should fail about 50% of the time. It's back to Doug's question earlier. It's one of the ways we pump fear out of the room is just to call it an experiment. And people are like, oh yeah, it might not work. It's just an experiment. But in that way, you can start to demonstrate sort of your leadership thinking. Like, I see a problem. I think I have a potential solution. Leadership is always more about influence. If I've got hierarchical authority, and believe me, I do, I own the company, I'm the CEO, I could tell everybody what to do. It'd be a really dumb way to run the business and I'd get really tired, but I could do it. And if there was a fire in the room and I yelled, get out, there's a fire, that's a really good place to exercise hierarchical authority and get everybody to safety. But most of the time we don't have those kind of fires here. So we let people lead. And the other thing is the expectations. We talked a little bit about this wallboard display where all the compensation is there. What you don't know, because I'm not showing you the picture of it, is there's 4 basic columns in that. Associate, which are the newest people here, consultants, next level up from associates, senior consultants, and principal consultants. And what we talk about is the expectations we have at each of those levels. That as an associate, your job is really to get adopted by the team, to understand how we work, understand how it works, understand where you fit into our system. As a consultant, you're starting to get adopted by our customers. They're starting to value having you on their team. They see your ideations producing value for their projects. As a senior, what we talk about is that your job is, when you're part of a pod or that sort of thing, that the whole tide rises, even if you're not directly pairing with people. And again, to me, that's a fundamental act of leadership, when suddenly just your presence on a team seems to raise up everybody else around you. And everybody has a different style to do that. We don't have a particular style of leadership for that. And when you get up into the principal column, you're really expected to be able to see things all over the company and help build up the entire company at that point in its business. So again, there's probably a lot more aspects of leadership here that we could dive into, but that's a kind of a high-level survey of how things work here. I guess maybe the biggest point is you don't need hierarchical in order to lead it.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. We just have a few minutes left. I have one last question, and that is, on your presentation, you talked about build systems versus bureaucracy.
Yes. What
to you is a system that's not bureaucracy, and what is bureaucracy that's not a system? Or what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I probably maybe was naturally born to be a systems thinker. I don't know. But I can tell you that that's where my mind always goes.
I was born to be a bureaucracy thinker.
And so when I see something, so we have a poster here at Menlo that is both maddening and so truthful. It's amazing. And it comes out of the group Vital Smarts, now called Crucial Learning, that very famous for the book Crucial Conversations, which I would highly recommend. But their philosophy was really embedded in a book originally called Influencer and now called Crucial Influence. And really, this embodies the very nature of the company, their company, which is change behavior, change the world. And the way to change behavior, we can try as hierarchical leaders to try and change behavior. You know, the old posters we'd have around the room that, the beatings will continue until morale improves type of thing. But when we create simple, repeatable, measurable, visible systems of work that everybody understands, suddenly you start to see the behavior changes in the company that you need. And, you know, it's a little harder to describe this in words. I would highly recommend the tours where you'll see a lot of our systems at work. Our planning game system, our work authorization system. We talked a little bit about our hiring system. I think, you know, some of the most broken cultures have a disconnect between their traditional HR systems and the culture they're trying to produce, right? And you wonder, like, are we talking about the same company here? You know, but you can even hear like our prosperity system for people getting raises. It's very clear. And what I would say is when you get to good systems thinking, things that actually, if, at first glance, look like a meeting are actually very repeatable processes that are going on here. And so planning game is one of the most delightful ones here, where we plan with our customers either once a week or once every 2 weeks, depending on the cadence we have with them. And we use these little handwritten index cards. I mean, we're a weird software company. We believe in paper-based artifacts. And we estimate those cards in hours, and we fold the card to the size of the estimate so that a 4-hour card literally looks half as big as an 8-hour card. An 8-hour card looks half as big as a 16-hour card. And then we plan that against capacity, which is a planning sheet. And I can actually show you I can probably show you what this looks like, because I have that in my my screen here. So I'll share this window, and I'll bring up my PowerPoint here. And if I go here, I've got all these wonderful hidden slides here that we didn't see. Oh, we didn't talk about the babies. Let's see. Oh, darn, it's not in this slide deck. I apologize.
If you want to send us some images, we can send with our summary at the end of this.
Yeah, but what I'm really tempted to do, but I don't want to rely on Wi-Fi because sometimes it gets a little hiccupy. I'm tempted to just pick up my laptop and walk into the room and show you. But the point is that every system of planning work, of executing work, of deciding if work is actually done. We have a show and tell system every week with our clients, to our hiring process, to our promotion process. Every one of these is a simple, repeatable, measurable, visible system of work. And so you don't have to have a lot of meetings. You don't have to be going through procedure documents to make sure we're doing everything right, because everybody understands the systems because they're participating in those systems week in and week out.
Great. Well, anybody else have any last minute? I think we need to probably wrap. We've got a couple of minutes here. We're going to send you guys a survey and ask what you think and what the future of Self-Management USA should be. Notice that we did not announce our next one because we're kind of talking about maybe we could do some pivoting or shifting. We'd love your input on that. Also, if you do complete the survey, Menlo will be sending you a book or two, or a couple of people a book or two. Who did the survey. Richard, thank you so much for your time. Highly encourage anybody to go visit if they're within drivable distance. And anything else you wanted to add, Tom?
No, it's fantastic, Rich. Thank you very much. And there are virtual tour options at Menlo. Just sign up. It is a great experience, and you get, at least some of the experience there. So highly recommend that to everybody, no matter where you are.
Yeah, that was one of our experiments during the pandemic. nobody could come anymore. Nobody's getting on airplanes. And quite frankly, for the first 18 months, we were virtual Menlo too. So the first tours were virtual tours of the virtual Menlo. Now it's virtual tours of the real one. But yeah, anybody who wants to get twice a month, we do free virtual tours. They last about 90 minutes and you click on a button and you're here.
That's so
The Menlo newsletter is pretty good too.
Awesome. Thank you.
well, great.
I feel like I'm amongst all my friends here. This is so cool.
You are. I can't believe you and Doug had never met. So we get credit for that here. It's so managing. Anyway, great. Thanks everybody. Oh, Mark, did you have a question? Or are you just waving goodbye?
It's a wave.
Bye.
Great to spend time with you all. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Kat. This is wonderful.
Thanks, Richard.
You bet. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.